You think you can walk away? I don't need to walk.
Macau, China Peninsula, November 1971, 2 a.m. The air in that room was heavy, saturated with the smoke of expensive cigarettes and that unmistakable smell of old wood and varnish that only private casinos with a long history possess. It wasn't a party, not a friendly business meeting. The double oak doors were bolted, and outside, men in dark suits with calloused hands made sure no one interrupted. The rule on that upper floor was absolute. What happened at that table would not leave those four walls. No cameras, no press, no witnesses who weren't already bound by silence. If the man sitting at the gun missed, his career would end that night, or something far worse, his life. I've spent the last 30 years tracing the testimonies of stunt doubles, bodyguards, and lighting technicians who were on Hong Kong film sets during the 1970s. My job isn't to perpetuate the myth, but to dissect the reality that Hollywood and Asian production companies chose to burn. I speak with the detached perspective of someone who has read files that should never have seen the light of day. And what I'm about to tell you is the story that the Chinese triads tried to bury for 5 decades. It all began 3 weeks before that night in Macau with a simple rebuff in a restaurant on Nathan Road in the heart of Kowloon. Back then, Bruce Lee wasn't just a movie star. He was a cultural phenomenon shattering the world's preconceived notions of Asian men. But in the shadows of Hong Kong, success comes at a price, and that price is paid in the form of protection. The triads, the criminal organizations that controlled everything from opium trafficking to film distribution, didn't see Bruce as a martial arts master. They saw him as a source of income who refused to pay up. Bruce had consistently refused to pay extortion fees for his films. His logic was simple. He didn't need protection because he was his own protection. To a high-ranking member of organized crime, a man known in the underworld simply as the boss, this wasn't just a waste of money. It was a lack of respect that threatened his authority with the other clans. The boss was a man of the old guard, someone who believed that steel and gunpowder were the only universal truths. To him, Bruce's displays of speed on screen were editing tricks, lighting effects, and rehearsed choreography designed to deceive the uninformed public. He decided it was time to test the Little Dragon's legitimacy, not on a film set, but on his own turf. The invitation arrived in the form of a brief, cold message delivered through a film producer who acted as a bridge between the industry and organized crime. This producer, a man who years later, on his deathbed, would leak the details I'm about to tell you, was terrified. He knew that this invitation to Macau wasn't optional. It was a trial. Bruce Lee received the message as he was finishing a training session. His inner circle, including Raymond Cho, begged him not to go. They knew that Macau at that time was a lawless territory where disappearances were commonplace. But Bruce had a philosophy he applied to every aspect of his life. Fear is simply a lack of preparation. If he backed down in the face of the threat, his message of empowerment and freedom would crumble like a house of cards. He arrived in Macau alone, unarmed, without bodyguards. He wore a simple, dark suit that concealed the electric musculature he had cultivated with almost religious discipline. Before entering the casino, he paused for a moment in front of a mirror in the lobby, not to fix his hair, but to perform a slight wrist stretch, an almost imperceptible circular movement meant to lubricate his joints for what he knew was coming. It was his only preparation. Upon entering the private suite, the stage was set for a psychological execution. In the center, a circular gaming table. On one side, the boss, surrounded by 3 of his most loyal enforcers, men who didn't flinch when Bruce entered. On the other side, an empty chair. The producer was in a corner, trembling so much that the ice in his glass was melting. The whiskey bottle kept clinking. The boss wasted no time with pleasantries, pulling out a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson, a heavy, short-range but lethal weapon, and slammed it down on the green tablecloth. The sound of metal against wood echoed in the absolute silence of the room. "They say you're the fastest man in the world," the boss said. His voice was a rough whisper that cut through the cigarette smoke. "They say your body moves before your thoughts even form. I say you're nothing more than an actor who started believing his own lies." Bruce didn't respond immediately. He sat with a calmness that, according to the witness, was more unsettling than the gun itself. His breathing was slow, controlled, deep. There was no trace of sweat on his forehead, even though the temperature in the room was high. The boss took the gun with a deliberate movement, cocked it, and pointed it directly at Bruce's forehead. The distance was no more than 5 centimeters. It was contact distance. At that proximity, there's no margin for error, no trajectory to calculate. There's only a finger pressing a trigger and a bullet traveling at hundreds of meters per second. The wager is simple, the mobster continued. You claim that human speed can anticipate mechanical intent. I claim that this piece of lead is faster than any muscle. If you move and I miss, you have my respect, and my clan's protection will be free forever. If you move and you're not fast enough, well, the world will have a martyr, and I'll have a bullet. That'll be one less thing to worry about. The bodyguard smiled. To them, it was a macabre joke. They were convinced that Bruce Lee, the great screen warrior, would break down, beg for mercy, or freeze with the primal fear of staring into the dark depths of a loaded barrel. But Bruce didn't close his eyes, didn't plead. In that instant, time seemed to stop for everyone present. The silence became so thick you could hear the second hand of the wall clock ticking, marking a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Bruce kept his hands visible, resting gently on his thighs. He was in a state of flow. Absolute. That mental zone where the surroundings disappear and only the pure connection between observer and object remains. What the boss did was make the fatal mistake of underestimating the silence. He thought Bruce was frozen with terror, but Bruce was reading. He was reading the tension in the shooter's forearm, the slight change in the dilation of his pupils, and the microcontraction of his index finger that precedes the shot. Then the first act occurred, what I call payoff number 1, without anyone seeing the movement of his hand. Before the boss could even close his left eye to aim, Bruce made an upward circular motion. It was so fast that the producer swore years later that he only saw a flash of light. When those present regained their full vision, something had changed. On the barrel of the Smith & Wesson, just behind the front sight, rested a Hong Kong dime. No one saw it come out of his pocket. No one saw Bruce's arm extend. The coin was there, perfectly balanced on the cold steel of the gun. It was an unprecedented psychological blow. Bruce had not only been quick enough to touch the weapon, but he had done so with such precision and delicacy that he hadn't disturbed the shooter's pulse, leaving a foreign object as proof of his superiority. The boss blinked in confusion. The added weight of the coin, however minimal, broke his concentration. Sweat began to trickle down the necks of the bodyguards, who instinctively took a step back, as if they were facing something otherworldly. Your finger is slow because your mind is filled with arrogance, Bruce said, breaking the silence for the first time with a voice as sharp as a razor's edge. You think the weapon gives you power, but the weapon is merely an extension of your fear. The boss, enraged by the humiliation, gritted his teeth. The coin trick had made him look ridiculous in front of his subordinates. His face transformed into a mask of pure hatred. It was no longer a challenge of skill. It was a matter of survival for his ego. This time, no tricks, roared the boss as he roughly threw the coin to the floor. This time I'm going to pull the trigger. I won't hesitate if you really are the little dragon. I hope your ancestors are ready to receive you. The mobster's finger began to exert the final pressure. The hammer of the gun began its slow return. The air in the room ran out. The producer closed his eyes, waiting for the explosion that would stain the walls red. But what happened in the next 0.8 seconds wasn't a fight. It was a correction of reality. It was the moment when physics and extreme training met to prove that sometimes man is more than the machine. In that precise instant, time ceased to be a linear measure and became a series of frozen frames. The boss's finger turned white from the pressure on the trigger. The hammer of the Smith & Wesson recoiled, overcoming the resistance of the internal spring. It was the point of no return. Under any other circumstances, by any other logic, the story would have ended with a dull bang and a body hitting the wooden floor. But Bruce didn't wait for the sound. He was already moving before the firing pin struck the primer. What witnesses described afterward defied the physics of combat. Bruce didn't lunge forward like a desperate animal. He glided like Mercury. In a movement that lasted exactly 0.8 of a second, his left hand, fanned out like steel, struck the side of the gun's cylinder. It wasn't a brute force blow, but a surgical deflection. He shifted the barrel's axis by just a few centimeters, enough so that the bullet's trajectory, if it were to exit, would pass to the side of his 100. Almost simultaneously, his right hand became a precision projectile. His knuckles impacted with the force of a hammer on the ulnar nerve, just above the chief's elbow. It's a pressure point that, if struck at the correct angle and speed, produces an immediate electrical collapse in the arm's nervous system. The result was instantaneous. The fingers of the boss's hands lost all their strength, involuntarily opening in the spasm. The gun didn't fire. Instead, the revolver was ripped from his grasp by the inertia of Bruce's movement. For a second, the silence in the room was so profound you could hear the fluorescent lights in the hallway whirring. No one was breathing. The boss stared at his own hand, hanging limp at his side, paralyzed and trembling. On the gaming table, where chips and ashtrays had once stood, now lay the revolver, but it wasn't the same. Bruce, in that same microsecond of action, had pulled the trigger. The gun was open, its 6.38 caliber bullets scattered across the green felt. They looked like dice thrown in a bet the mobster had just lost in the most humiliating way possible. Bruce straightened up. There was no trace of agitation on his face. Not even his breathing had quickened. He stared intently into the eyes of the boss, who was still processing the fact that he was only alive because the man in front of him had decided so. "A weapon," Bruce said, his voice cutting through the air like glass. "It's only dangerous when the man wielding it believes he's superior to his own nature. You trusted steel. I trusted time. Time always wins." The three Triad enforcers stepped forward, their hands instinctively searching beneath their jackets. The tension reached a boiling point. The producer, cowering in his corner, was certain the place would turn into a slaughterhouse at any moment. But the boss, slowly regaining feeling in his arm, raised his left hand to stop them. There was something different in the mobster's gaze. The hatred hadn't vanished, but it had been replaced by a respect born of pure terror. He had just witnessed something that shouldn't be possible. He had seen an unarmed man neutralize the most lethal technology of the era in the time it takes a heart to beat once. "Stop," the boss growled, massaging his injured arm. "Everyone out except the actor." What was discussed in those next 10 minutes, door to door, the meeting held only between the Mafia boss and Bruce Lee, was never fully revealed, but the results spoke for themselves. That very night, Bruce left the Macau casino with the same calm demeanor with which he had entered. The producer, who waited outside with the car engine running and his heart in his mouth, recalled that Bruce didn't utter a single word during the entire ferry ride back to Hong Kong. He simply stared at the dark water of the South China Sea, his hands clasped, as if meditating on the fragility of existence. From that night on, the Triad harassment of Golden Harvest Productions abruptly ceased. There were no more demands for protection money, no more accidents on the film sets. Word spread through the underworld that Bruce Lee was not just an artist, but a man who operated on a different wavelength than the rest of humanity. But why did this story never make the newspapers? Why are there no official records of this encounter? The answer is as clinical as Bruce's movement. For the Triads, admitting that their most feared leader had been disarmed and humiliated by an unarmed actor would have triggered an internal purge. Respect is the only currency that holds the Mafia together. Losing it means death. On the other hand, Raymond Chow and Bruce's inner circle knew that making this victory public would be like putting a target on the back of the entire Lee family. The Triads forgive a defeat, but they never forgive public shame. A pact of silence was made. The producer who witnessed everything kept a secret for decades. Only when he felt the end of his days was near did he decide that the truth was too heavy to take to the grave. He told me that for years he had nightmares about the sound of bullets rolling across the table in Macau. He said that what disturbed him most was not Bruce's violence, but his lack of it. Bruce didn't need to break the boss's neck to defeat him. He only needed to show him that his power was an illusion. This is the true essence of what Bruce Lee was trying to teach. Many people see as he watches movies and sees punches, kicks, and screams. But what happened in that Macau suite was the pure application of his philosophy, Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. It's not about fighting the opponent, but about intercepting their intention before it becomes action. That November of 1971, Bruce Lee didn't defeat a firearm. He defeated the fear the gun represented. At the end of his life, Bruce used to say that he didn't fear the man who had practiced 10,000 kicks once, but the man who had practiced one kick 10,000 times. In that room, he demonstrated that he had practiced mental presence 1,000,000 times, to the point that danger was no longer something external, but just another element he could manipulate at will. Today, when I walk through the streets of Kowloon or visit the old studios in Hong Kong, I still feel the echo of that night. People still debate whether Bruce Lee was truly a fighter capable of winning a real tournament or just a great choreographer. For me, the answer lies in that Macau casino. The records I've traced, the testimonies of men who are no longer with us, all point to one thing. Bruce Lee mastered time and space in a way that modern science is still trying to explain. True mastery isn't about how many enemies you can take down, but about how you can transform a deadly conflict into a lesson in humility without spilling a single drop of blood. Bruce Lee wasn't a myth because he could break boards or fly through the air. He was a myth because he could look death in the eye from 5 centimeters away and tell it that his time hadn't come yet. And this is where the legend becomes a proven fact. The world can continue to doubt. They can say it's a story exaggerated by the passage of time or by the mystique surrounding him. But somewhere in Hong Kong's lost archives, and in the memories of those who saw the bullets roll across the green carpet, the truth remains intact. That night in Macau, the little dragon not only saved his career, he saved the idea that the human spirit, when tuned like a violin string, is capable of overcoming any mechanical obstacle. The most dangerous weapon in the world was never that Smith & Wesson .38 caliber. It was always Bruce Lee's mind, and that's a truth that, once you understand it, forever changes how you see the limits of what's possible. The world was never the same after Bruce Lee, but he always knew that the secret wasn't in the punch, but in the silence that precedes it. Whoever was in that room never forgot it, and now you won't either. Yeah,